I want to ask you something. How many times have you been told that if you just tried harder, if you just got more organized, or if you just focused a little bit more, your ADHD would get better? And how many times did trying harder actually work, right? Here's what nobody tells you. Willpower is not the problem, and it never was. Your brain is not getting the biological raw materials it needs to function properly. And until you fix that, no system, no planner, no productivity hack is going to work the way that you want it to. Hi, my name is Dr. Jamey Cunningham. I'm a PhD psychologist. I'm an Army veteran, and I have ADHD myself. In episode 6 of the ADHD and Emotional Mastery series, I'm going to be straight with you, and I'm going to go right to the foundation of it. Because today I want to talk biology. What you eat, how you move, how you sleep, and what biohacking tools actually have the science behind them for ADHD brains. Now, this is coming from chapter 2 of my book, ADHD and Emotional Mastery. And this is the chapter that really kind of changes how people think about their symptoms permanently. So let's get right into it. The biopsychosocial model that I use across all my work starts with bio, B-I-O, for a reason. And it's not an accident. Now, your brain runs on chemistry. Dopamine, norepinephrine, serotonin, and these are the neurotransmitters that regulate attention, impulse control, emotional regulation, motivation, and memory. In ADHD brains, these symptoms are chronically dysregulated. Now, here's the part that most people miss. Those neurotransmitters, or systems, do not exist in a vacuum. They are directly affected by what you eat, whether you exercise, how long and how well you sleep, and what other inputs your brain is receiving every day. So medication can help regulate these systems, of course, and for many people, it's a very important tool. But medication alone addresses roughly one layer of a 4-layer problem. The people that I have seen make the most dramatic improvement are the ones who got the biology right across all 4 layers simultaneously. And that's what this episode is about. Okay, so let's talk about layer 1, diet. Now think of your brain as a high-performance engine, and it really is. Now you wouldn't take unleaded gasoline and put it into a diesel engine. If you did, not only would it cost a lot of money, but it would be a problem. Nor would you take diesel gasoline and throw it into your regular car. Same way that you wouldn't put jet fuel into your Honda. That's not going to work. So what goes into the machine is actually very important. So think of your brain as a high-performance engine. Now, it needs the right fuel to run. And for ADHD brains, the wrong fuel makes every symptom worse. Now, the research is extremely clear on a few things. First of all is something called omega-3 fatty acids. This is one of the first supplements that I would take if I had ADHD. And omega-3 fatty acids are found in fish like salmon and mackerel, and in nuts like walnuts. Now, omega-3s directly support dopamine synthesis and help the regulation of the prefrontal cortex. Now, remember, your prefrontal cortex is your ability to think. This is the part of your brain that makes good decisions. If you had trauma to the front part of your brain, the decision-making capability is going to be compromised. Now, in 2020, there was a meta-analysis in the Journal of Neuropsychopharmacology, and it found that omega-3 supplementation significantly reduces ADHD symptoms and the severity in both children and adults who were omega-3 deficient. Now, most Americans are. Now, the next thing is zinc and magnesium. Now, these are found in leafy greens, in pumpkin seeds, and in whole grains. And both are cofactors in dopamine production. Now, multiple studies have shown that children and adults with ADHD tend to have lower zinc and magnesium levels than the general population. Supplementing or eating more of these foods does not cure ADHD, but running a deficit actually makes it worse. So, are there a few things that you should cut out of your diet? Yeah, there are. Now, one of those that you might not think about very much, and it has been in the political news lately, is artificial dyes and preservatives. And of course, you always hear about this, high sugar diets consistently show up in the research as ADHD aggravators, not causes of ADHD, but aggravators. So if your diet is high in processed foods and low in whole foods, well, you are essentially throwing gasoline on a fire that your medication is trying to put out. Now, the diet that I recommend in Chapter 2, certainly one of the stronger diets, is the Mediterranean diet. Now, in my book, The Ideal Body Blueprint, I do talk about that too. In fact, that was one of the first books that I focused on, and it was primarily because I was very overweight. I weighed about 320 pounds, and I was sick and tired of being overweight and not fitting into my clothes. And what I found is not only did I have ADHD and I was diagnosed with PTSD and depression symptoms, but I was grossly overweight. And I had a mild heart attack in my 30s. And so when I became a psychologist and started to study how the body actually functions, that was the first book that I wrote. And I lost over 150 pounds in about 18 months. And one of the things that I noticed is in changing and working with the different supplements is my ADHD started to get better. I started to have less symptoms and started to have less panic attacks. So the Mediterranean diet is actually one of the well-researched dietary patterns for brain health and one of the strongest evidence-based programs for mood and cognition and ADHD symptom management. Now, if you want more on that, you can continue to follow my YouTube channel and my Facebook page because I often talk a lot about these type of things, and food and losing weight, if that's one of your goals, is just a symptom of helping minimize the effects of ADHD. All right, so let's talk about what I'm going to call the ADHD brain and nutrition stack. It does not have to be complicated. The more fatty fish and more leafy greens, more whole grains, less sugar and processed foods, that's the core of it. And that kind of seems like a theme that runs through a lot of different healthy nutrition activities and healthy nutrition guidelines. Okay, so let's talk about exercise because this is a big one. Now, most people don't like exercise. If you are one of the lucky few individuals who like exercise and like to throw on your jogging shoes and run around the city or the town or the country, good for you. Most people can't. I personally used to love to get out and hike and be very active. But after the military, I went through so many different surgeries. I have a prosthetic knee. I actually have had revision surgeries on my prosthetic and surgery on my shoulder and other parts of my body. And you know what? Exercise, I just can't do it. I can't run. I can't pound. It's very difficult to me. But movement, on the other hand, that's something different. And you can get a lot of movement in the exercise. In fact, in the Ideal Body Blueprint, I have 6 different principles, and one of them I name as movement, especially for people who are very overweight and their BMIs are higher than 30. Inflammation becomes one of the aggravators to somebody who's trying to lose weight, and heavy working out is one of the worst things that you can do to your body that increases inflammation. But let's talk about exercise and ADHD. Now, exercise is the closest thing to the natural Ritalin that science has ever discovered. And I'm not being dramatic about this. That is what the research actually shows. Now, when you do aerobic exercises, and aerobic is where you're breathing heavy basically, compared to anaerobic where it is like lifting weights very slowly or lifting something very heavy, that's anaerobic, and this is aerobic. So aerobic, think of air, a lot of air circulating through your lungs. Your brain is going to release dopamine and serotonin and norepinephrine within minutes. And these are the exact same neurotransmitters that ADHD medication works on. So if you're taking ADHD medication, those neurotransmitters are trying to be stimulated by the medication, but you know what? You can get the exact same effect, if not better sometimes, than just doing some aerobic exercise. Now, I know that's not exciting, and sometimes it's easier to take a pill rather than doing a little bit, but there are fun things that you can engage on. Now, one of the things that I do, since I'm a veteran, and since I've had multiple surgeries, and since I cannot walk sometimes without my cane or just the problems with my knee, I have a recumbent bike, and I can sit down and I can pedal and I can get my heart rate up, and I can watch a movie, I can read a book, I can listen to music and get the exercise that I need without the harsh pounding on my body. So exercise also triggers the production of something called BDNF. Now, what is that? That is called brain-derived neurotropic factor, which literally strengthens and grows the neurons in your prefrontal cortex. Think of it as BDNF is, I know it sounds like one of those rated triple something, but it's not. BDNF is brain-derived neurotropic factor, and think of it as strengthening the muscles within your prefrontal cortex, or the bonds between them. And that is the part of your brain that most is compromised by ADHD. Now, Dr. John Rattley at Harvard Medical School, who wrote the book Spark, documented this very extensively. 30 minutes of aerobic exercise 3 times a week produces improvements in attention and impulse control that are comparable to low-dose stimulant medication in some studies. It's not identical, but it's very comparable. And guess what? It has 0 negative side effects, unlike a lot of medications. So the best types of exercise for ADHD are aerobic: running, swimming, recumbent bike cycling, rowing, and these produce the biggest dopamine responses. So strength training is second, and that would be anaerobic exercises, and is particularly good for mood stabilization and reducing anxiety. Plus, it makes you feel good. And you feel better in your clothes when you're losing weight and you're getting better. But then you could do some things like yoga and mindfulness movement practices. And those are the third category of exercises, but they're very excellent for emotional regulation specifically. Yesterday I was up at the VA hospital, and oftentimes the weather's good today, and I saw about 30 or so. I think that they were employees, but they had their yoga mats. They were out there enjoying the sun, getting a little bit of stretching going on. They were doing planks, and they were just enjoying the day. So a lot of that stuff that improves the mood and the emotional regulation. But here's the practical piece. You don't need an hour. You don't have to dedicate that much time to it. And in the beginning, when you're developing habits that stick, one of the things that I talk about is tiny little things repeated over and over and over and over and over, so that they don't seem difficult. And after a while, you develop the neuroplasticity to develop some of those things. So 20 to 30 minutes of moderate intensity aerobic exercise is enough to get the neurochemical benefit. But you can start out with 2 minutes a day, 3 minutes a day, 5 minutes a day. Slowly build that up. The key is consistency. So the research shows that morning exercise does produce focus benefits that last 4 to 5 hours compared to doing it later in the evening for most people. Now, if you can move before you sit down to work, your brain is a completely different instrument than it was when you woke up. Now, I work out every day. Not because I'm disciplined, and I didn't used to work out every day, but now I've got to the point where I had to slowly build up my habits, and it honestly, it did take a good year, 2 years, but I love getting on that bike, and that's my thing, is the recumbent bike. Now, I know, living here in Salt Lake City, that one of the things that I look for is, because I have a lot of veterans that I talk to and work with, is always looking through the local classified papers to find people who have these beautiful new recumbent bikes and bikes that they're just giving away, or sometimes they're 25, $30, and it doesn't take a whole lot of space. But if you had something like that, you could get to the point where you're just jumping on it for a few hours a day. Great. In my office, right behind this camera, I have a chair that has the pedal bikes on it, and sometimes I'll jump on that too, just to stay active, not to break a sweat, but just to stay active. So I work out because I've experienced what happens to my brain on the days that I do not exercise. And it's now become basically a non-negotiable factor for me in my life. Plus, I like to feel better in smaller clothes. All right. Now, let's talk about layer 3. And layer 3 is sleep. And this one is very difficult for ADHD people. And it was a challenge for me for many years. It still is a challenge for me, because sometimes as soon as I lay down in my bed, boom, my brain is almost like it turns on, and it's almost like the faucet is just like, boom, and my brain can't stop thinking. So this is one of the most underrated ADHD interventions in existence, and it is the one that most people with ADHD are getting completely wrong. And here is why sleep matters more than ADHD brains, or for ADHD brains, than for neurotypical brains. The prefrontal cortex, already the most compromised region in ADHD, is also the most sensitive to sleep deprivation. When you lose even 1 or 2 hours of quality sleep, you lose the prefrontal cortex function first, that decision-making capability, which means more impulsivity, more anger issues, more emotional outbursts, more emotional dysregulation, and more executive dysfunction, which is more RSD. So everything gets worse. So, sleep is a deprivation loop, and the cruel irony is that ADHD itself disrupts sleep. The dopamine dysregulation that causes focus problems during the day also prevents the brain from properly winding down at night. So you get that loop. ADHD makes sleep worse. Bad sleep makes ADHD worse. So breaking that loop does require 3 things, and here's what they are. First, a consistent sleep and wake time. Even on the weekends, it's crucial, because your circadian rhythm is controlled by a biological clock that does not take weekends off. Sleeping in by 2 hours on a Saturday or Sunday is enough to shift your sleep phase and give you something that feels like maybe jet lag on Monday. ADHD brains are already vulnerable to circadian dysregulation, so do not make it worse. Second, screen time. Oh, where's my phone? In fact, I've hidden my phone from myself. So, screen time. No screens for 30 minutes before bed. Just completely hide it, put it in the next room. If you're listening to music when you go to sleep or something like that, a meditation, put it away, out of your reach. The blue light from your phone or your laptop suppresses melatonin production. And melatonin is already lower in many adults with ADHD compared to the general population. So this is not optional if you want good quality sleep. If you can get rid of it 1 hour or 2 hours before, do that. And the third thing is melatonin at the right dosage. Now, most melatonin products on the market are 5 to 10 milligrams. So I would talk to your doctor about that if you have a doctor, but do some research on this. And really, that's too high for most people. Research shows that dosages between 0.5 and 1 milligram are as effective or even more effective than higher dosages. So with fewer next day side effects. And sometimes people who take too much melatonin, I know for me, I feel groggier the next morning, or it takes a little bit more to get up and running. So talk to your doctor, start low, but do not dismiss it just because you've tried the 10 milligram version once and you felt good or you felt groggy. Try lower dosages, but talk to your doctor about that. Now, I take melatonin nightly. It's a personal benefit that I noticed, but there are other things too. As a psychologist, I'm very interested in Carl Jung, and I am very interested into dreams because I have a spiritual belief about dreams and what they mean, because they're part of our psyche. And I think that if you understand those, you can understand a little bit about you. And when I do take melatonin, I notice that my dreams are much more vivid and much more memorable. And so if you are someone who struggles with dreamless or unrestful sleep, that shift alone can feel incredibly significant. Okay, now I want to talk next about a concept that you may or may not have heard of, and that is something called biohacking. Now, this is layer 4, biohacking. Now, we're understanding what the first part of it is, bio. So this is biology again. Now, before you turn out, I'm not talking about weird science experiments. I'm talking about using evidence-informed tools to get the data from your own biology and make smarter decisions based upon that data. Now, what is a biohacking tool? So let's call nootropics. Now, these are supplements that are designed to support cognitive function. Cognitive function is your ability to think better. That have a lot of solid research to support ADHD brains. One of those is Bacopa monnieri or Monnieri. So this is something, it has been shown to improve memory and reduce anxiety, and Rhodiola rosea, which supports stress resilience and mental clarity. And I'm not telling you to replace medications with these supplements. And what I'm telling you is that if you are already doing the other 3 layers, these can provide just that additional edge to make your sleep better or to make your ADHD symptoms less aggressive. Always consult your doctor, however, before adding anything new. So, supplements. Let's shift now to wearable technology. Now, I'm not wearing my watch right now, but I personally wear a smartwatch every day, and I recommend it to all of my clients that I work with. I took it off right now because it beeps, and when I'm recording, I don't want that sound. Now, these watches, I don't use them for counting steps. I use them for the biofeedback data, heart rate variability, sleep quality, stress markers. And when you can see that your stress response spikes at 2 p.m. every day, you can start to understand why your focus falls apart in the afternoon. Now, data creates options. See, you just heard my phone going off, and I have it in my drawer. But data creates options. And no data means that you're guessing. Now, as a psychologist, I would say that I'm a scientist, because I'm always trying to study different things to see how this factor affects my life, how this factor affects my life. I run side by side, or what are called A/B tests. I eliminate one to see how it makes me feel. Does it make a difference in my life or not? And one of those things is light therapy. Now, years ago, a business partner of mine, when I was traveling all over the country, I was working with a university, and my business partner was a chiropractor. And we traveled all over the United States, probably gave about 300, 400 seminars in a couple-year period, and our clientele was doctors. chiropractors, dentists, MDs, nutrition experts, people who own gyms, people who are very into the body. And he noticed that I was having a lot of problems sleeping. Now, my job at that time was to teach people how to improve their goal setting, their business goals and that kind of stuff. But he was a chiropractor and he was like, Jamey, why do you always see tired? And I was like, man, I just don't sleep. And years ago, my ADHD was so bad that I would sometimes go 2, 3, sometimes even 4 days with no sleep at all. And then I would crash so hard that an explosion right next to me couldn't wake me up. And I repeated this pattern over and over and over. So for Christmas, he bought me this little blue light. And he said, just throw it in your suitcase, wherever you go, just turn that on in the room. And I turned on this blue light and it started to have a tremendous effect on me. And you can buy these things on a lot of different places. I've recommended thousands of these little blue lights over the years. And I've used one ever since, and I carry it with me when I travel. Now, the next thing is morning light exposure, either natural sunlight or 10,000 lux light therapy lamp. Now, lux is Latin for light. So when you're looking for this, just look for LUX, and all it means is it's light. So it's 10,000 light therapy, just Latin and then English. Now, one of the things that I try to do when I first wake up is I walk from my bedroom to the kitchen, because when I wake up, I'm facing east and I'm seeing the sun come up. And most of the time I can catch it right before the sun comes up. But as soon as it pops over these beautiful Wasatch Mountains, I'm looking right at the sun to see that, because that is one of the most beneficial and peaceful times of the morning. And getting that light exposure directly into your eyes and into your brain, that's the time that really lights up your day and gets the brain stimulated. So either natural sunlight or 10,000 lux light therapy lamp directly regulates this circadian rhythm. It boosts the cortisol levels in the healthy morning pattern, and it improves mood and focus for hours. So if you want that energy boost, it's better than a cup of coffee. If you struggle with winter depression or morning fog, this is a tool worth trying. Blue light therapy and the morning sun, or the 10,000 lux light therapy. Now, I have seen it make a significant difference in people that I work with who have ADHD, and especially if they have seasonal mood patterns. All right, so we're winding things down here. So here's what I want you to take away from this. First of all, your ADHD is not a brain chemistry problem. It is a whole body problem. And the most powerful intervention available to you are not always pharmaceuticals. Sometimes the most powerful thing that you can do is to eat more salmon, or go for a run, or go for a walk, or put your phone away for an hour before bed and start tracking your biofeedback data. These 4 layers, diet, exercise, sleep, and biohacking, are what I cover in full detail in Chapter 2 of ADHD and Emotional Mastery. And if you want to start with one chapter, that one chapter shows you how the biological function connects with every other strategy in the book, that's the one. And I'll tell you what, I will get you a free chapter of ADHD and Emotional Mastery right now at ADHDmasterybook.com /chapter. I will throw that inside the link here, and you can get that and just test it out. Now, the other thing is you can buy the book plus 5 additional bonuses. You can actually go to Amazon.com and buy it for $10, but I'll give it to you for $4.99. You could also, if you like audiobooks, you can buy the audiobook for $13.99 on Audible, but I'll just give that to you anyways. So I just want you to have it, because I know the challenge with ADHD. It has affected my life so intensely that it's one of the primary reasons I started to study psychology, because I couldn't figure out why my brain would not shut down and why I couldn't accomplish certain things in my life. but I felt like I had more energy than most people, and I had these amazing thoughts than most people, and I learned how to control it. And I've always said that if you have an ADHD brain, you have a superhero power. It's so much energy that you don't know how to control it. And that's what I dedicated my life to do it. So if this episode gave you something useful, subscribe so that you do not miss episode 7. And we are going into the psychological layer next. And I'm going to show you exactly how CBT, or cognitive behavioral therapy, works for ADHD in a way that is actually usable, not just theoretical. So I will see you there.